So this book is BRZRKR, Poetry of Madness, the pen and ink version of this book by Steve Skroce, who's both the writer and artist of this one-shot. Dave Stewart is the colorist on it, and I will look at a comparison of both because it's cool to see the black and white and also the commentary from Steve Skroce, but it's really cool to see how the colors added so much to the artwork and really enhanced the story. I'll be looking at all of that in this week's episode of My Wednesday Comics Closer Look. Okay, BRZRKR, Poetry of Madness, pen and ink version. This is the black and white process edition of this book that came out in late 2023. I'm going to keep this one handy because as I do this flip through, I'm definitely going to compare it to the colored pages so we can see what Dave Stewart did and added in as a colorist. It's really fascinating. I really love that Boom Studios produces these pen and ink version of the books. I've collected a few of them, and it seems like this one and the last one that I picked up, which is also BRZRKR, and I had reviewed it in one of my previous My Wednesday Comics videos. They produce it at this regular comic book size as opposed to a larger size like a lot of artist editions do. The unfortunate thing about that is one of the things they like to do is include a commentary here by the creators, which is nice, but it forces the pages to be shrunk down a little bit more. So you lose a little bit of the resolution of the artwork, but I say to keep it as an affordable book and accessible to people who don't want to plunk down hundreds of dollars for an artist edition, I say it's okay. Steve Skroce's artwork is always impressive. He always puts in a lot of detail in his rendering. It's neat to see just in this opening splash page, which this is Atlantis, and it's a crowd of barbarians entering into Atlantis. It's great to say where he picks and chooses what detail he's going to show. So for example, this crowd scene back here, they're just tiny marks, but because he adds the detail up front here, your eye and your brain kind of fills in like, oh, here's a huge, massive crowd already, without having to see all the spears and shields and weapons detailed in the tiny bit. I always wondered if Steve Skroce was influenced by Jeff Darrow because they both worked on the Matrix movies. As far as his level of detail, this like background detail and stuff, there's a lot of similarities there. Again, in this page, that's kind of why I marked it here. It's a great reverse shot of the opening splash, but you can see like the expressions that he's adding in here. And then some of these background characters are just little circles and little tick marks, but you get it that there's this huge army coming at you. Steve Skroce's commentary, for the most part, is pretty humorous, and I'd say focuses a lot on the writing process because he's both the writer and artist on this. But it is nice to hear what he talks about, what he's thinking as you're reading through the story. That's the cool thing about this pen and ink version. And you can see how tight his inks are. They're great, really beautiful, very clear, and he draws great faces, expressions, and guts. This is the introduction to Keanu Reeves's BRZRKR character called Unute, and he's just causing crazy havoc here, slicing and dicing and super heroic. The armor is based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie, and he even talks about here in the commentary, and you can see it in the cover, the colors. This is so much of a reference from that movie. It's amazing. It's a great design, great idea. One of the things I love about Steve Skroce is his ability to capture a likeness and draw different expressions of it. And because he worked on the original Matrix movies, I'm guessing he drew a lot of Keanu Reeves, and he just nails his expressions here in his face, and it's awesome. There's just a lot of violence. He's got a lot of these shots, a lot of money shots with Keanu Reeves, like coming at you and swinging his sword and giving you this crazy expression, even getting wrecked himself. That's part of BRZRKR's thing. Just all out violence, and he's really brutal, and he takes a lot of punishment, but he heals and he's immortal. You often see him maimed and dismembered in certain panels. And Skroce is not afraid to show you that. Again, I wonder how much Jeff Darrow influenced or rubbed off on him when they were working together, because this definitely has a Darrowian feel. So this is kind of a cool spread to look at in comparison with the colors. I'd say that the clarity on this is pretty good already, even though there's a lot of detail, a lot of lines, a lot of rendering. It's like a montage sequence, and you're seeing Keanu Reeves' character Berserker in different scale, doing different things, you know, fighting different enemies here. He's small here, he's up front here, he's a big close-up here. But you can read it pretty clearly in the black and white version. But let's look at it in the colored side. So automatically making his armor that Dracula inspired, Francis Ford Coppola inspired armor, which the costume designer was this famous Japanese costume designer, Aiko Ishioka. She's an incredible costume designer. So she designed this armor, not for this book, but for the movie. And it's this blood red color, which works great for Dracula, great for Berserker. So it just stands out in the page. But here you can see the comparison, and you can even see how they cropped it off. I don't know if that was intentional or just part of the printing, but you can really see even clearer how Dave Stewart just leads your eye with his colors. Yes, there's a lot of blood, but you can really see what is going on. This is like a present day moment, and Berserker's colors are what they should be. But then these past moments that are kind of happening where you see him like thinking about all these battles, thinking about moments in the battle, he mutes them back here, and it gives you some nice depth in the page. I kind of miss this part here of Berserker biting the face off of one of his enemies, but it's very, even though they cropped it off here, it's really clear here because the colors totally render that out. And then this girl, character who is like the servant for Berserker in the story and also serves as the narrator, in this page, you kind of lose her a little bit. I mean, you see it, but she's really clear in the colored version with all that red behind her. So I love the choices that Dave Stewart is making to make the page really stand out. You can see in this version, in the pen and ink version, you can see how Steve Skroce uses line weight to delineate between background and foreground elements and things that he wants to recede on the page. It's a really light touch here. I don't know if he's scaling down his drawings. I did read in here, and he had mentioned that he draws the page digitally first so that he can scale things up really easily. Then he prints them out, blue line, and then light boxes them and tightens the pencils and inks them traditionally, which is a methodology I want to try for my own comic work, because I love that traditional ink touch that I feel like digital kind of loses a little bit. So he's using that process here. I don't know how he gets such thin lines like in this kind of panel. Maybe he's shrinking something down, or maybe he's using a really thin nib. It's a nice contrast to these thicker, bolder lines where your eye wants to follow Berserker's character here. It's a great likeness of Keanu Reeves. I love it. It's like a John Wick Keanu Reeves. And he has this moment here where Berserker has a flashback. He serves this king and serves as pretty much a bodyguard for this king who used to be this boy. It was a boy that his parents were murdered, and he came and rescued him. The color kind of treats that. He changes it subtly, not so dramatically, but you do make the connection between the adult version and the young version because of, one, the expression, but two, also the green in the eyes, which is a nice touch, a really nice touch. And then he kind of adds more of a warm red tone here to take us into this flashback moment. This is stuff that you kind of miss when you're seeing things full colored, but black and white really show you how the artist is using blacks and whites to draw your attention to certain areas. This great little reverse eye here. See in the color, yep, it's like the reverse eye. Here's like water splashing across the cliffs, but color really emphasizes that and helps with that moment. Steve Skroce draws great environments, great setup shots, great wide shots. I love this little pattern that he puts on these priests, part of the bad guys that are kind of manipulating the king that's Keanu Reeves' friend. Steve Skroce tends to draw smarmy characters. Like, look at this expression. Even this main king, they kind of give you like, make your skin crawl a little bit. He doesn't just have a generic face, a generic comic book face that he goes to. He's really studying likenesses and applying that to his character designs. He must have referenced this. Must be like reference some actor or somebody he knows. Here he singles out BRZRKR, a lot of blacks in his costume, and keeps the rendering on this trap pretty open. So it's more white and the blacks of BRZRKR stand out. There's a lot more color rendering going on. Feel the organic nature of this trap as opposed to the black and white version. It's a really good contrast with all the reds going on. There was one tiny storytelling moment that I didn't quite catch. I had to go back and reread, but they pierce BRZRKR with this funnel so that they can drink his blood. I think if they just had a cutaway shot of, the piercing going into his body, we'd get it, but it just appeared here suddenly, so I missed that. And then here's the entrance to Cthulhu. It's always a great obstacle / villain / enemy to fight. It's really frightening. He mentioned how he designed, in this commentary, he designed it to have more tentacles because I guess the description of Cthulhu is giant bat wings and more of a human body, but he kind of made them all wrapped into these tentacles, which is awesome. So here's the color version of Cthulhu. It's amazing. It's a really great, frightening image, and it works really well with all the blood and the reds in the other designs. I love this guy's expression. He's like totally out of his mind's bonkers. Creepy. Again, one of those creepy, smarmy characters. And then here comes BRZRKR flying at you again. I'm ready to take on Cthulhu. He mentioned that his size, the fight of the size was a challenge for him. Like, he was super excited to do the battle, but he realized, wow, I've got like this very, very, very tiny Superman-like character fighting Godzilla. So how do you stage that when scale is so different between the characters? So here is like how tiny BRZRKR is compared to Cthulhu. You can kind of see it. They highlight his path here. I love the Cthulhu colors that Dave Stewart picks. Gross and otherworldly. One thing that Steve Skroce has always been good at is action sequences and staging action sequences. I think that's why he was hired as a storyboard artist by the Wachowskis. He's just so good at staging stuff, and he's got a great thought process of where one action sequence or moment leads to the next, and how there's like a follow through in that, and you really can track it. Even though it's chaotic and otherworldly, you can kind of track where the action's going. I'm curious of what kind of tools he used for these like speed lines. I wonder if it's a pen or a brush. What happens is he cuts off one of Cthulhu's teeth, and I love that because of Cthulhu's colors are purples and reds, Dave Stewart pops this yellow in the back. So you can really create separation and clarity on the form. Here you almost, you can see it, but it's really clear here what's going on and where BRZRKR is. So I love that use of color to help clarify and enhance the artwork. Yeah, you can see he's just going at it. Most of the time, I'd say in general, he's a very tight artist. It's not left for interpretation. He's pretty tight with his forms and just his finishes. But for this action stuff, as Keanu Reeves' character BRZRKR is moving around fast, he tended to do a lot more loose lines, which is cool. And then there's this flashback moment again, goes towards the same shot almost with the kid. Kid has a slight walleye too. It's like a nice subtle design thing, but he keeps it in there. And then the king dies. They are stuck inside the stomach of Cthulhu. There's those green eyes again. And Berserker, in clear Berserker fashion, reaches into this guy's heart, rips it out, and shoves it in his mouth. The violence has no bounds in this book. Then Berserker hears, like supernaturally hears where the heart is for Cthulhu, and then finds his way to find the heart, to rip it out and kill him. So this is a really chaotic page. You can tell a lot of destruction's going on. And then to see that in color, boom, it's great. It's like there's a great sense of like depth and feels like a cavern inside. You can really feel you're inside the body of Cthulhu here. Here, you can see it, but you can see how much color adds to it. And then the kingdom of Atlantis is destroyed because of it. And I'm assuming that's why Atlantis is this underwater kingdom. The myth of it is because of this moment. And then Berserker leaves. He leaves, and he leaves behind his companion. He separates from her and leaves her behind. And here it is in color. They go full on yellow, which, you know, really contrasts all the purples we've been seeing up to that point. That yellow flashback final moment kind of stands out and buttons up the story. It's cool compilation, cool version of this book. So on a scale of 1 to 10 for story, I'd give this a 4. I love that in this one shot, Steve Skroce is able to set up a little bit of backstory for Berserker, the relationship between him and the king, build up to the conflict, and then end it on this huge epic battle with Cthulhu. I think it was nicely self-contained. You didn't feel like you were missing anything, and it was paced out pretty nicely. For world, or the genre that it lived in, I'd also give this a 4. I think that the setup in Atlantis and just that whole fantasy, mythic storyline, and you throw in Cthulhu in that, were all a fun playground for him to set up a story of Berserker. It really felt like a myth, and he set that up nicely in the world. On a scale of 1 to 5 for characters, I'd give this a 3. I've never really connected with the Berserker character. I think it's just because he's so powerful and invulnerable, and he can heal from anything, and he just like is incredibly violent in all his fights. It's hard to see a little bit. I mean, you saw a little bit of the shades of the humanity in his relationship with the king. So that was nice, but he's a little one-dimensional to me, and maybe it's just because I haven't read enough Berserker. And then the side characters, the narrator, the girl who is the servant for Berserker, other than just being a narrator, I didn't really feel like her character added much to the story. She didn't have that much of a relationship with Berserker other than she just admired him and kind of followed him around. And then at the end, the relationship was over. The king had a cool arc, but he wasn't that likable. And then all the like evil guys, the priests or whatever, they were pretty one-dimensional. And granted, it is a mythic kind of story and it is a one-shot, so it's not like he could have had a lot of runway for character development, but the key component of that was Berserker himself. And like I said, I've never really connected to that character. And finally, the art for this, I would give this a 4/5. And I say that only because I love the artwork. I think that Steve Skroce is an incredible artist, and I pretty much love everything that he does. But because this is specifically about the pen and ink version, and Steve Skroce's pen and ink work is awesome, but I think that Dave Stewart's work just added a whole nother level to that. And that would be a 5 for me. That book, the colored version of this book, is a 5 as far as art. So I'd say the pen and ink version was a 4 asterisk. There were some things in the pen and ink version that I got a little bit lost. That color just solved for me. So yeah, that just because it's the pen and ink version, I just give it a 4. But overall, I really love the artwork on this. And like I said, I pretty much like all the artwork that Steve Skroce ever does. So that's BRZRKR Pen and Ink, Poetry of Madness. Check it out. I definitely recommend getting both versions if you can, getting the color version and the black and white version if you get a chance, because they offer 2 different sides to the same coin. And it's nice to see a little bit of Steve Skroce's behind the scene, as well as seeing how the color work adds so much to it. Hopefully you like this video. Definitely like and subscribe and comment. Let me know what you think about the book. And if you have the book, let me know what you think about it. And if you haven't already, check out the second video that I'm making for this week for Atari Force number 1. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.